All right, what's up y'all? My name is Sam, and today I'm going to show you about a project I started in 2018, which is a process of sort of quote-unquote restoring Super Nintendo soundtracks. And I am a film and video game composer, and as well as filmmaker and music producer. And I grew up kind of idolizing the Donkey Kong Country soundtracks. I was sort of unhealthily obsessed with them, and they made me want to take up music. So one day I downloaded FL Studio and taught myself music, and I started to develop a fascination for how the Super Nintendo made music. And kind of what I found was that it was based on trying to make the chip work with the smallest amount of space possible. And that means that you can't just have a linear recording like you have in games today, or in the past day. Now they have dynamic recordings, but you couldn't exactly do that because it was the first time that they were kind of developed. It was the first chip that had the capability of fully sampled audio experience. Because in the previous generation of Nintendo, the NES was based on, you could have some samples in it, but most people use that for drums and stuff because there was not a lot of space. So, and the rest of them just used pulses and synth waveforms that were stocked into the system. So the Super Nintendo was the first system where you could use fully sampled instruments on a console. And what that means is that basically, the composers, they find a synth patch that they like on a keyboard. They have a piano, and they play one note of the piano, and they record it into the SNES. And they give it a loop point, they make it shorter, so that way there's just one note recording of that instrument in the system. And the system, basically, they tell it to play this note at different pitches and different volumes, and that makes a melody. And so that means that the whole soundtrack, when you're listening to a Super Nintendo play, the system is basically playing the music back to you live by using these one-note recordings or samples. And that's basically how it made music. That allowed them to sort of get a lot of different sound, basically any sound you wanted, out of a small space, because you only had to store those single note samples in the system, and the game's RAM would do the rest. And so my process of finding out this was I downloaded a tool called SPC Tool, which allowed me to see everything that went on in the Super Nintendo soundtrack, like all the pitches that were being played, and more importantly, it allowed me to save these samples that were in the game. And so I compiled all these samples into what's called a sound font, where you could basically you could just play them in your DAW. And so that led me to believe, okay, where did these samples come from? And so I heard a lot of interviews. David Wise said he used the Korg Wave Station to make these soundtracks. He based the sound on the Korg Wave Station. So I downloaded the Korg Wave Station, and I found that there were some waveforms in there that I recognized from Donkey Kong Country. And so then I said, well, maybe I can recreate the soundtrack using that, and thus the project was born. And now the term restoration is kind of a misnomer, because it refers to paintings, how paintings would be restored, and old film movies would be restored by and basically what they would do is scrub away the signs of aging, scrub away and make the paint in the painting vibrant again. But the reason that's inaccurate is because there's nothing to scrub away in the SNES. It's just depreciated quality, and you can't exactly get that back. So the only way to do this, the only way to make something that's a true hi-fi listening experience, is to recreate it from the ground up. And the problem that you run into with that is, how do you make it accurately? So what I had to do was, the game is programmed, it's all in, there's no MIDI. If you're a musician, you might know MIDI is the preferred way for communicating music data to computers. But they didn't have that. It was all coded in hex data. And so what I had to do was find a program that could convert this hex data to MIDI, which is a format that my computer can read, and I can see the notes in. I can see all the notes that's going on the soundtrack. And so that allowed me to say, hey, to see, hey, what note, the exact notes that are being played in this game. And so basically what I had to do is, once I found all of these new synthesizer patches that the composers used, I just had to plug it into this MIDI data, and then put a little modern studio effects like reverb and delay, and the rest was history. And a lot of the hard part was finding out what machines they use, because you don't exactly have a reference except for these really low quality samples that you're just kind of earballing and saying, okay, well that sounds like this. But one thing I did was, David Wise had a lot of Twitter presence, so I asked him what he used, and he wasn't kind enough to give me a sort of a rundown and a list. Now that was only half the battle, because a lot of these games used a software development kit and he didn't even know where the samples came from when he used that. It was a preset, pre-made samples. So I had to find that, but before that, I knew that the aquatic ambience, the water level sound, used pretty much only the Korg wave station and the Roland R8. So what I did was I downloaded the Korg wave station VST from the Roland website, which means that I could basically use the machine in my DAW. And if I X out of this, you can see. Here's what the wave station looks like. You can load up kind of whatever you want, and if I go to find the ROM 11, and there should be an AirVox somewhere. But anyway, I don't exactly know where it is, but I sampled it from the Korg wave station and just made it where it's a single sample, and this is what it sounds like. So that's just the note. That's just it looped. And if you go to the soundtrack, you can hear. If I play the original soundtrack back, you can hear. And if you isolate that, you can select different channels to mute out. If I isolate that to this one channel, you can hear there's that sound. If you go over here, it's like. And I have some reverb already there already. And if we go into the MIDI, which I have stored right here, you can see that, hey, this is wherever it is. Oh, here it is. This is kind of the channel where it played those waves. And so basically you just had to copy it down and go, and then you would hear. But that's not entirely right either, because if you listen to back to the playback, the samples are kind of short. And so what they did was they used what's called an envelope in the music world, where you can basically say, hey, each time you play a note, it has a fade in the volume and a fade out. And so I had to recreate that by ear. So now if you use the short envelope to create like a short articulation, you hear. But now that still doesn't sound quite right, because if you go back to the MIDI, you can see there's actually 2 notes being played for every note that you hear. And this was something that they did commonly in the Super Nintendo soundtracks. They would put note echoes or note delays in there, because you can see the velocity dips down here. They would put the note echoes, and those would basically create a more immersive listening experience. But I didn't want to use the notes for that, so I just removed all the extra notes, and I made a delay channel, a delay effect with the same amount. Oh, I see it's already on there. But see, you can hear the difference. And then if I enable the delay, welcome. And it's a subtle effect, but it's there. And then you just add, from there you just add more effects like saturation. Because a lot of these samples were from the 80s, so they weren't very exciting, so you have to kind of put a little light distortion on them. And then if you go back to the original, they also have another channel, which what they would commonly do is make delay effects by putting an echo, by duplicating the same channel and just making it later, so it was like an echo effect. And you'll see that if I can play it here. If I can remember which channel it was. There it is. And so I tried recreating that with the delay effect, but it didn't work because this channel has a little bit of a different articulation. It's a little bit softer. It's kind of subtle to hear, but it's a little bit softer. So I just put that in the different channel and gave it a little bit of a different envelope. And then when you play it back, you have... And that's the full thing. So from there, you just have to go, what's next? There's the strings, so you go and see, what's the strings sound like in the original? So then you would go and say, okay, that's chords, so you would go and copy those chords from the MIDI, from all the channels that they play here. And then you go and I said, I found this one's from the Roland U220, and I found the same sample in the virtual sound canvas VST that Roland has. And if you listen to the strings playback, you can hear them like this. And so that has like a whole articulation in the end. It goes very lush strings. And then you had in the beginning you have like a little vocal rising effect, which is also the wave station, just that voice effect again, just played high. And then you also have a bass that plays in the beginning, which is again that voice sound just played really low. And then if you go here, you have the this was something called a wave sequence. This was something that the wave station kind of had a feature of, where they would string different waves together, and it would make like sort of a sequence. That's what you hear in the song. And so David Wise, you kind of use this effect. And if you go, I actually use the VST to kind of see what would happen if I use the wave station's sequencer to kind of string this effect together. And I think it's going to play kind of slow because I have the tempo down. So let me just raise the tempo and play it. Disable these and raise the tempo. And you would have all the wave sequences here. So that was pretty cool. And so then you have there's the feedback effect that we all remember, right? That little electric guitar. Now this was it was a recorded guitar, and so I couldn't exactly find a source for that, but I got someone else to record that same guitar through that same amp and record just a sample of it and kind of put in I used a impulse, or what's called an impulse response. It basically simulates an amp given an impulse, like a recording of like a flat signal through the amp. And then you have that, because if it was like that, it would just sound like, and then you have the amp effect, like that. And then you have the piano effect with all the notes taken out, all the delay effects taken out. Because if they were in the system, this would all be like notes, but you just take out the notes and use a delay plugin. Whoops, it's too fast still. Forgot to turn down the tempo. And so then you have the main melody, which is also from the wave station, and the harp effect, which is also from the wave station. And so let me see, when you put it all together, it should sound like this. Compare it to the original, you can say, I think someone made a comment on my YouTube. They said, you don't exactly notice a difference unless you've been playing it a while, or if you go back to the original, you can notice it sounds like someone stuffed bread in the system. That's what they said, and I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know where that came from, but if you listen to it, you can listen, it sounds kind of muffled. So that's pretty much, you know, the difference you can hear. And you can also, I have all these videos of all these songs. I did every song from the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack. I also did Super Metroid, and I'm working on, thank you. I also did a Link to the Past. I'm also in the process of doing a Link to the Past, and there is also Secret of Mana slated for the future. So you can go and listen to and they also have download links. You can download them in MP3 and FLAC format for free. And so, and there's also another cool nifty feature, is that apparently there is a patch which will allow you to play these on the actual system, and with the music. It's called the MSU1 patch. So let me plug in my controller. And so some other guys, they kind of did all the digital wizardry for me, where you can actually play this with the music on it. Well, I'm going to try to full screen this thing. And the sound effects are not still going to be restored because the patch doesn't allow for that. But you can just kind of hear the music restored. know which one y'all probably want to hear is Sticker Brush Symphony, right? So I'll go and give that one a try. Oops, I don't even have any enough noise. But actually, wait, no, there is the one, that level is right here. Also, the death tunes are, well, the jingles are restored as well. So that's a lot of fun. And now, I haven't really run into any copyright issues with this, except for when I'm, selling the vinyls. I have vinyls made of these things, and you can buy them online. Well, I think the Donkey Kong Country 1 is sold out. Donkey Kong 2 is still in the works. It's still coming out, and so is Donkey Kong 3 and Super Metroid. So, woo. And anyway, yeah, that is pretty much. How much time do we have? Oh, it's only 20 minutes. Wow, went fast.
You have Super Metroid on there with an injection?
With it, you mean the game? Yeah, I can play Super Metroid. I'm not good at it. I suck, but Oh wait, do I have Super Metroid? I hope I have it installed. That's okay, I can show you guys how to install it then.
Perfect. You need to fill 40 minutes.
There you go. Or actually I have to do Super Metroid MSU1. But actually, this will probably take a long time to download, so I'd better not. I don't think I can. But does anyone have any questions about that or anything else they'd like to see? Yes, you right there.
I kind of joined a bit late. What VSTs did you use to make this?
So every keyboard has its own kind of VST. So it's different for everything, for whatever you need, but I use for the aquatic ambience, I use the Korg Wavestation VST. And these are some samples that I just recorded from them. And you can see kind of the interface here. This is an official Korg Wavestation VST. And you can get all the sounds from there. You can kind of isolate you can pick your patch, you can isolate the wave that you can use if you want to just get one sound. And I also used for the strings of aquatic ambience let's see, where is it? The Roland Sound Canvas VA. That's their official Sound Canvas VST. And for the drums is the Roland R8. So I just found samples online of the Roland R8, and then you just plug those in because they're really easy. All right, anyone else? Oh, did you have more to ask? I forgot to ask if I covered it.
I had another question, but someone else wanted to ask.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what you got over there?
So I'm curious about what your decision-making process is for when you resample something versus like using the Roland VST itself rather than not doing that with the Wavestation. And similarly, when you find it better to duplicate the notes the way that they were done in the original Super Nintendo score versus using a delay effect. Like, what considerations drive your decisions there?
So read me the first part again. You wanted to know what the
when you would go for resampling something versus using the VST on its own.
Oh yeah. So a lot of these patches will have multiple samples within them. Like whenever because obviously, if you play one sample on a keyboard, you go down on the end of the keyboard, it's going to sound really bad if the recording was made of in the middle. So they just have a bunch of different samples. And so when that happens, you want to take you want to either use the VST or or you have to sample the whole thing. And so the only reason why I used the sample for the Airvox here is because it was the only sample on that thing. It didn't change samples at all. It was kind of just a synth thing that changed. But anytime, like, see how I have the VST here? I did that because it has multiple samples within it, and it's like this sound is not going to be the same sample as this sound. So you have to kind of be proactive about getting the full quality patch of it. And the other thing you said was when if you wanted to know when to use when I decide to use the actual duplicated notes that are put in there or the delay plugin, and that is like, because you can tell when they actually meant for it to be delay. Like if you go to this MIDI here, you can see these are the velocities down here. You can tell that this other sample, when it switches to the second sample, it's going down in velocity, which is volume basically. So you can tell they wanted that to kind of be a delay. If it ever is repeating and there's no dip in like volume or velocity, then that's probably a repeated note. You kind of have to use your best judgment, but usually in my experience, it's pretty clear. I haven't had to make any difficult decisions on that. Does that answer your question? Nice. Who else? You in the back.
I was curious when you the one you had we were talking about the wave sequence part in aquatic dynamics, like the bass and sound effects. I was curious on the wave station, was that one of the pre-made patches, or was that something you had to piece together?
No, that was something I had to piece together based on the waves. He kind of made his own. And for the most part throughout the series, when he used sounds like this, he just made his own. He didn't stick to any like presets that I'm aware of. Except for there is actually one preset in here, and I don't know which one it is, but it's called Beehives, and it actually sounds like the Beehive levels from Donkey Kong 2, like, you know, with that arpeggio on the guitar. And I thought that was pretty cool. It's not the same notes, but it was clearly like an inspiration, and it says Beehive, so I was like, oh, that's cool. Anyone else? Yes.
So obviously a lot of this information has been lost to time about like what they were sampling and everything. So what are some of like the holy grail questions that you're like, if I just could like ask the person who wrote this, like, so if that makes sense, like what are you still like hoping to find someday? Oh yeah, well, there's still some soundtracks where I'm just not sure, and I just can't do enough because I'm not sure what they used. But some of these are not even from the exact machines, because these companies like reuse the same samples over and over again, like in sample CDs. So a lot of times I end up just using the sample CDs with everything already there. I'm like, okay, that sound is already there. So even if they use some older machine, it's still there and I can still use it. It's still the same sound. And you were, I forgot, sorry, I think I got a little bit off beat. What was the question again? So like, obviously a lot of this is lost to time, so like, what are the things that you like wish that you could like find easily? Like, what are you still looking for, like researching? Well, I wish I could just ask them for every project, but really Dave is like one of the only composers that I found that has an online presence. So there's always like some kind of obscure thing that I'm like, oh, I actually have no idea where they found this, and I have to kind of, you know, guess at it. You know, for not for the Donkey Kong series or any of the ones I've done, those are all complete. But sometimes you have to make a little guesswork, like, okay, this sounds similar, but I don't exactly know what they do for the time being. Did I answer your question? Alrighty. Anyone else?
Yeah, just a quick question. So that patch you showed us on Donkey Kong Country 2, I imagine that's just for emulators, or does that work with original hardware as well?
It works with original hardware. Like, you mean the VSTs? Like if I put it on the original hardware, would it work?
Well, the plugin for the emulator you showed us, I guess, does that actually patch the ROM, or is there something running in the emulator to like replace the music?
Oh, you mean the MSU1 patch? Yeah, that patches the ROM, and you have basically, here, I'll show you the insides of the like where it's stored. So if you go, you have all these, you have all the tracks as .pcm files. And I don't know how to encode them from WAV to .pcm. Someone else does this for me. But basically, you have to have them stored in there. And then and then there's a patch that patches the game that tells it, hey, instead of playing the music, play these, tracks that you have here. And so, does anyone else have any questions? Yes.
Any plans for Earthbound?
Earthbound, I have not had any plans for, but I will do whatever the community requests. So if you'd like to hear a soundtrack, you can send me a tweet on Twitter at Prince Samlet, and and then I'll respond to any. I'll really respond anywhere. You can leave a comment on YouTube or anything, but.
Can we write Earthbound on a blue bird and just give it to you now?
On a bluebird? What's a bluebird? Oh, okay. Yeah, you can do that. And yes.
Can we just ask you to do Earthbound?
Oh yeah. I went straight from having too much time to having too little time. That's a big soundtrack. And yes, in the back.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. So I know you said you didn't have Metroid installed, but do you have the tracks on you, or are they uploaded on YouTube?
Yes, they're all on YouTube. Everything that's Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 and Super Metroid is uploaded on YouTube. And I'm about halfway through Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. And yeah, that's about the extent of it. But if you have any tracks that you'd like to see from Super Metroid, I can certainly pull the project up. I have all the files here.
Yeah.
Which track would you like to see? Lower Brinstar?
Yeah, if you have Lower Norfair.
Oh, Lower Norfair. Yeah. Yeah, I have them all. I got everything. And these projects, all these project files, as well as the files that are like the samples and the instrument patches. Some of them are VSTs, but some of them are like contact patches. If you know what contact is, if you make music, they are contact patches, and they're all available on the Dropbox, which I have stored on my Patreon as well. So let me see, where did I put Super Metroid up here? Did I just take it out of the browser, or did FL Studio take it out of the browser? Because I know I have it here. All right, Lower Norfair. Norfair, which one is it? Is it the Hot Lava or Ancient Ruins?
The Ancient Ruins, like that.
Oh yeah, boom, boom. I remember that one. That one was fun.
And also, could you talk a little bit about your process of so you knew from David Wise, the things to look for, but maybe for this one you maybe didn't know?
I didn't have any contact with the composer for this one because he doesn't really have a presence anywhere online that I know of. But they have a really good spreadsheet called, here I can kind of find it for you guys, newer video game music sound sources. And you can find this from a Google search. Google search, it's basically a Google Docs file. And I think oh yeah, there it goes. So I think it would be under, I'm not exactly sure where it's under. I think if I just, oh yeah, just video games. Generic video games, there you go. You can actually find somewhere, if I go Command F, Metroid. Oops. I can't type. You can find, they have a lot of them listed here. And I think, when I did Donkey Kong Country, that was before they had this many all this stuff. So I had to kind of find Donkey Kong Country 2 on my own, but it was good because I could contact Dave and ask him what he used. So I just kind of used this as a starting off point, but it didn't have everything. But luckily, most of the game is just these three sources: Proteus 1, Universe of Sounds Volume 1 CD, Proteus 2, And I think there was some S50 in there too that they didn't exactly put on there. But this is a great resource. This is also where I found they had all the link to the past sounds here. And it's great because if you can find it somewhere, if you can, like the Proteus one has a sound font, a sort of semi-official sound font. And there's also some documentation of this. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess my other question for that is like, how did they find like the original samples themselves?
The original, so they have you mean how did people how did they find them?
Yeah, like you were able to ask David, but like they couldn't ask David because he didn't make that, so.
As far as I know, they just looked for them. Like they had the original hardware and they're like, oh, this sounds like this. And a lot of these, like the Proteus 1 and the Proteus 2, was used for a wide variety of things. So a lot of these soundtracks end up being the same samples. And like I said, there was actually a software development kit where a lot of these games you can hear the exact same sound because they were part of a software development kit. Like for example, in Super Metroid, the overgrown with vegetation area, that has that marimba in it, and it's the same one in Donkey Kong Country actually. So they just used from the software development kit. Does that answer?
Yeah.
All right. So this song was a fun one to do. You have these drums here. Oh, I got a Discord message. Hey! It's a wood block combined with a kick, I think. So if you disable it, you have, that's that ticking you hear in the whole track, and then it's layered with this kick. And I think both of these were from the universe of sounds, if I recall correctly. So you have, and then what else do we have here? We have that horn. I love that horn, man. This is Contact. This was also the Roland S50, and I just have all these articulations here because I had to use a different patch for each one and just specify how short or long I wanted the note to be. And then, oh, that choir, that like hit choir is always so fun. I think this was, I forgot where I got this one, but it's on that, it should be on that list. And also, if you look on my videos, at the bottom of the description, they actually tell you where everything came from, like all the machines. So you can see them directly if you're like, oh, where did this come from? You can see it down on there. And let's see, choir 2. And now here, let's see, I can do the bass. Oh yeah, this was the Proteus 2, I believe. All right, let's see how it sounds. Okay, did anyone else have any questions or, yes, Kirby Hat.
Kind of more of a personal preference. Is there something that you wound up working on that you gained a greater appreciation for? That what's a favorite of yours that came out of doing these customers?
Well, when I started working on Super Metroid and also A Link to the Past, really most of the games that I play are I play like 5 games and Donkey Kong is 4 of them. So. But I did very much enjoy the style of Super Metroid, and I had also kind of went back and seen that because I like Hollow Knight a lot, and I was like, oh, this is kind of where the inspiration came from. And also, I'm finding, I find I enjoy these games a lot more now that I have to play them because I'm working on them, and I have to record the gameplay for all the videos that I make. So I don't just like when I do a YouTube video, you can actually watch the gameplay playing. So I have to actually play through these games. So I'm like, hey, it's work. I'm playing video games, but it's work. Yeah, does that answer your question? Nice. And you?
I have a question. So, if anyone wanted to help you or just join this project, is there a guide, a how-to on how to set up everything?
Yeah. If you're talking about as a music person, like if you want to try to do these things.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So basically, you have to get. I'll give you a quick rundown. You can find, anywhere you go, you can find what's called an SPC collection file. It's a .spc files. That's basically, they took the music files from the ROM and they dumped it into a file. So if you search on Google, you search for whatever soundtrack you want, you search for their SPC files, and then you go and get a program called VGM Trans. That basically translates the SPC file. If you drop it here, I'll show you one that you can drop. It gives you can see all the samples that go into it if you double click it, instrument 10, and then you can coordinate that. You also have to get this thing called Neko is a program. This allows you to play the soundtrack, and you can mute out different channels, so you can isolate your own channel, and you can also see what wave is being played. If you look where it says TN on each of the channels, that's the sample that's being played. So you can see this number here corresponds exactly to 23 in this. So you just right click and you save as a wave, and then you can hear the sample that's being played. Well, I think you can't, I don't know why it's not working for me, but you can also right click and do save all as wave, or it's not doing it for me now, but you can also do right click, save as MIDI. And that's what's going to give you that MIDI file that you need, that you have to load into you load into your DAW, and you can see all the notes here. And you basically you coordinate that with Neko, and you copy and paste the correct line into the correct VST. And so does that kind of answer your question? Nice. You said video setup? Like? Oh yeah, every time I restore a song, I go live on YouTube and I'm sharing my screen, so you guys see exactly this, and so you can see pretty much every song that I've restored from day one, you can see it restored live if you go back onto my YouTube channel and go into the live streams. So you can kind of watch them being restored. Sweet. Anyone else? Yes.
What's your channel, by the way?
Oh, Jammin' Sam Miller. Here, I'll pull it up here. Where'd I do with it? There it goes. YouTube at Jammin' Sam Miller. And you can find me on Twitter at Prince Samlet. And there's also a Discord if you want to join that. I think, I don't exactly know if I have the link everywhere, but Restoration Station, that's it right there.
Is that yours or like a community one?
Yeah, I created it for the restoration process. So they have channels for each game that I have restored, and so there you go. And does anyone else have any questions? Yes?
How did you get started doing this? Like, what was your inspiration?
So that's actually an interesting story. I kind of touched on it when I first started, but basically I used to be kind of obsessed with this Donkey Kong Country game, all three of the games, and so it got me into music. I taught myself music. I downloaded FL Studio, and I was like, okay, yeah. So I basically inspired me to become a musician because of all the different styles that they had, all the different sounds I loved. And so I got to thinking, like, what goes into, like, how are these soundtracks made? And so over time I found they were based on samples, and they had to crunch them down to fit into this thing. And then I found a program that it does not really work for me anymore, but it's called SPC Tool. It was basically doing what Kiro Neko is doing, except it showed me everything that is going on in the soundtrack, and more importantly, it let me save those samples that were in there. So now I could play those instruments in my DAW. And so then I made a Donkey Kong Country sound font, which a sound font is a file that you can use to play these like samples in your DAW, and you just have a collection of them right there. And so I said, like once I made that, I said, okay, where did they get these samples from? Where did they come from? And then I knew from interviews that David Wise said that he used the Korg wave station. He basically based the Donkey Kong Country sound on a lot of the Korg wave station, even though he didn't use it like for pretty much everything. And so I went and that's when I found that aquatic ambience waves, like that voice sound, and I found like the a bunch of other stuff. And I basically asked Dave, okay, where did you find this stuff? And he gave me kind of a list. Does that answer it? Nice. Anyone else? Yes.
I know Donkey Kong Country 3 had a different composer than the first two games. Did that represent a challenge?
Yeah, actually, Dave, that's an interesting story because Dave worked on 5 songs for the first game, and then he was pulled off the project to work on Diddy Kong Racing, I believe. And so Dave composed actually the title screen, the menu music, the Brothers Bear theme, and Wrinkly, and all of Wrinkly's themes he composed. But then Evelyn came and she took over the project, and she used a little bit of a different wave, so it was kind of, and she doesn't have an internet presence, so I kind of had to go all over again. Okay, what was this? But a lot of the samples are the same. I just had a few new ones to kind of scope out, and find. So it was a little bit of a challenge, but I got through it. And anyone else? Yes.
Have you ever considered making your own video game soundtracks after remaking all these?
Yes, I do. Actually, that has been kind of a dream of mine, and I've like started to become wanted to become a video game composer for a long time. I do a lot of film soundtracks, but that's because I went to school for film and I knew a lot of people. But I didn't know anyone. still don't know anyone that wants to hire. Video games are kind of a competitive field when you're talking about music. So I haven't actually found anyone that wanted to, would be wanting to hire me on a game. So, but that can be for the future. I do have some original songs that I've made as well, and also put on my YouTube. And I'm looking to try to make more. But that is definitely the end goal, is to make my own soundtracks. Yes.
Was reproducing these old tracks helping you understand the music theory behind them and your repertoire as a composer?
Oh yeah, it definitely does, because I can go through and I can look at all the notes that are being played, and so a lot of it really helped me to see how these chords are working, and it kind of taught me a lot about the time signatures and the chords that they're using, and about music theory in general. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and yes.
Could you repeat what that Google Sheet's name was, the sheet with the sound library?
Oh yeah, it's a newer video game music sound sources. This is a bunch of people have gotten behind this and sort of made it. It's a huge list, so it has a lot of stuff. It might not have every sound to all the even all the popular stuff, but it has a good bit of sounds. And you can also see composer equipment, what the composers had, and server equipment, basically what they're using to find this stuff. So it's a pretty cool sheet. And I also have my own sheet for Donkey Kong Country, for the Donkey Kong Country series. That is also, I think, available on my Patreon. You can find a link to that. And all right, anyone else? Yes.
Are you surprised that Nintendo hasn't stepped in yet with your uploads?
Given their reputation, kind of, yeah. I think I got a copyright strike on my when I uploaded the Link to the Past, the Overworld theme, because it's all just the famous da 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 da, and so I got a copyright strike on that, but it's only blocked in some country I don't even know. So, Yeah, does that answer your question? It was kind of a challenge when selling the vinyls, because then you're directly selling it. That's why I offer these for free, is because, like, okay, well, I'm not selling it, you know, so can't come after me. But Nintendo hasn't tried to take me down yet. But when we actually got permission, like a record label got permission to sell my vinyls from Nintendo, so that's where a lot of your money goes when you're buying these vinyls. IP. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Have you ever start doing, for example, Predator and doing, for example, the wind? How do you do the blowing wind?
Oh, the wind, like the sound effects? Yeah, I've actually done some Donkey Kong Country sound effects, and those are harder because they don't have like SPC files for them. So basically what I do is I open up, actually I usually use Edison for this. I open up an audio editor, and I go, let me find my Donkey Kong Country sound effects. That's SFX. And I actually have, I did restore some of the sound effects because I use them as my my text tones on my phone. So now whenever I get a text, I hear and so if you get the life counter or life balloon, you can play. Oops, I have it on the. How did I do that? I don't even know what I did here. Where is that thing? Okay, well basically, you can kind of tell it like, hey, detect the pitches, and it's kind of like detecting the pitch regions. Because if you play this sound, there's a lot of notes going on there. So if you kind of slow it down, and like what I do is I kind of play it really slow, and I go and use a pitch meter to analyze the pitches. And then this is actually, and then I just kind of, recreate that note for note and analyze the volumes and stuff in the VST. And I actually have let me open my project for this if I can find it. Here we go, SFX. So, life, and you can see that sound actually uses the strings patch. So you can go, and then I have it where, let's see, where's that click? Like, oh, it's not playing for some reason. I don't know why it's not playing, but, oh, because I have it disabled, duh. There you go. And that's kind of how it works. They use that clave for a lot of sounds, including the banana sounds. So, does anyone else have any questions? Or does that answer your question? Nice. And does anyone else have any questions? Yes.
So, as an extension of that, so not just like the sound effects that are like made as like jingles and stuff, but like sound effects like rain and wind and thunder and lightning. Like, how easy or how hard is it for you to source those rather than recreate the jingles?
Oh well, rain is easy as hell because it's just a rain sound. Like you don't even have to do anything. It's just like the rain sound is already there. Like for Super Metroid, all I had was like I just had that wave of the rain, and it's the same for A Link to the Past. But you said how easy is it to source them though? That was pretty easy because how many machines do like rain? But also some sound effects can be very hard because some of them are very unorthodox. And basically what these soundtracks usually did was they sourced sound effects from a library called either Sound Ideas General User Sound Library. I don't know, that's a mouthful. I don't know exactly what, but you can find it, Sound Ideas General User Sound Library 6000, or they used the Hollywood Edge series, and they had all these different editions of it, and I've basically found that I had a guy source them for me, and I pulled the waves and basically used those for the sound effects. But you have to sift through a lot of sound effects. But you can search for what you need because they're all labeled, so you can kind of find, okay, this is what they used. And particularly a fun one was the mining, from the mine music from the first Donkey Kong game, because that uses like this creepy mine sound. And everyone told me like on YouTube, they were like, wow, this is like nightmare fuel restored. So this will be a fun one because you basically had that mine sound for that whole first song, and that was hell to find. That little, it's just a mining ambience, and he basically used this musically. And look, that's just, and in this game, it's just like this short sample. I have to play this like sample so you can see how short it is. Let's see. It's just that short because it's also pitched up high, and you just have. That was what I had to work with. So you can imagine how frustrating this gets, because it's like garbage sound quality. And so yeah, does that answer your question? Nice. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, in the back.
So there's some video games that have, like from the SNES era, that have like voice in them, like Street Fighter 2 or the beginning of Metroid. So for those things, like, are those just completely lost in time, like the original sound files? And like, how would you go about recreating if there's like voices in the game? How would you go about recreating that?
Those are completely lost in time. And fortunately for Super Metroid, those were sound effects, so they weren't part of the music, so I didn't have to restore that. But for Donkey Kong Country, they actually have some sounds that they recorded for the game, like Donkey Kong's hurt sound, like, you know, the ooh, and Diddy going ow, and and stuff like that, and the the little crooning or whatever the hell that is. And so that's a sound effect, but this guy used those sound effects in the title screen, like where he made a beatbox out of those sounds. So I was like, crap, that's actually in the game. So, I got the 5 minutes left, Mark. Wow, y'all are some inquisitive motherfuckers. I just went straight from 20 minutes to answering 40 minutes of questions. Woo, love it. All right, so basically, I just had to leave those in the game as is, and I did, a little bit of remastering on them, but they're not very common, so you don't really hear a difference. But it's impossible to kind of restore those. I even asked some of the developers; they said those are lost because they're all on floppy disks, and the floppy disks like got corrupted on a shelf or something over time. So, does anybody have any more questions before we close out? Yes. Yes, I do have Gangplank Galleon, and that uses a lot of the guitar, so that one's a fun one because you get the real recording of a guitar. Let's see. We'll close that out with Gangplank Galleon. So here now you can meet the parts, meet the actors. You have these little pirate band instruments. And it's playing slow because the tempo automation, like it has to have some tempo automation. You have drums. I have to kind of switch stuff. You have those drums, and you have the bass. That's actually the bass used in the rest of the game, layered with an electric guitar. So you have that upright bass, which is also used for the tires bouncing, doom, 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 doom. And then you have it layered with the electric guitar. And so, if you go through the full thing, you have... I promise it doesn't sound like that in the real recording. That just broke something. I don't know what I did. But that's pretty much how it sounds. And yeah, I think that's our time. We have 2 minutes left. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the panel.